Catus, Maximus here, this time with a quick review of these Husky USA 5472s. These are knockoff 10-inch vice grips. This was back when Husky was still made in the United States. I think that was the 90s or something. These are not as well made at all as genuine vice grips, but they did have an interesting take where they had this flare handle, and these have one distinct advantage over traditional vice grips, and that's the fact that they can be released and then reclamped with one hand. And it's a shame they just weren't built as nice. What I mean by not being built as nice, this lower jaw, as we can see, is, I'm sure the materials are pretty good, but nonetheless, this lower jaw is a stamped piece of steel, and then the two primary tooth flat jaws. And flat jaw vice grips, this style was the very first set of vice grips. The very first set of vice grips made or were commercially available had flat jaws. They didn't have these slightly rounded jaws that end up becoming the standard. Nonetheless, they just used two pieces of ground steel that it appears that they electrically welded them to the bottom jaw and as well to the top jaw. So just a little bit cheaper that way, that piece of stamped steel. And as far as like the thickness of the metal, if we take a quick look at the handles here, we can see that the Huskies are just a little bit thinner. The sidewall steel, or the main body steel, if we look, just not quite as thick. I don't need to get out a measuring caliper, but you can see it's just not quite as good. On genuine vice grips, even though these are the first of the Taiwanese ones, they're still made traditionally. This is a fully forged lower jaw. So original vice grips were heavier duty. Something else that's a little bit cheesy, as you can see, just not very good finishing on the end. These are pretty blunt. Where on genuine vice grip straight jaws, they actually come to a nice point to where you can get at something that's flush. Another thing that we can mention, if we align the top jaw here, we can see that there's just quite a bit more cross section right here under the jaw on a genuine vice grip than there is on the Husky. So that was a little bit disappointing when I started noticing that, because I thought, man, they have a huge distinct advantage, and I'm surprised there aren't more pliers like this. And of course, the big advantage to locking pliers is that you have a huge amount of leverage with the long handle when you are locking these in position. And of course, they stay holding tight versus any other type of plier. It was really, as far as one of the tools that really changed the world besides the socket set, it's probably vice grip pliers. Anyway, with the vice grips, the big deal is if you're working on something, maybe you need to hold on to something, get into position in order to apply the vice grips, it's much more difficult to release these. You kind of have to reach around and try to get under there. It's really pretty awkward to do that with normal vice grips. So say you have a broken off bolt and you're in a position where you got to hold yourself up. Let me get these adjusted. There we go. Always takes a second. Come on now. So you have a broken off bolt. You can take these, lock them on, get a turn, and then easily release them. Bring this back and do the same thing again. And that makes it a huge advantage. Just being able to grab these, turn something, and just be able to release, readjust it, and then reapply it again. Just makes a pretty big difference. And that's what confuses me about these and why more other brands, maybe there are some brands that do this, but this is the first time I've ever seen this style where you could just so easily just be able to take it, pop it loose, and then relock it again. So anyway, just wanted to share these old Husky vice grips, and hopefully there'll be some people who comment down below who will mention other brands that may have this same style of flare handle, because I think they're pretty cool. Of course, the most important thing is just the ability to be able to pull on it, because you have this nice hook versus how flat the traditional vice grip handle is. So if you really need to yank on something, you have just a nice area. It gives you a much better purchase on it. You can really yank on these. And the same thing with twisting. If you're in a situation where you need to twist something, of course the handle is quite a bit taller down here, so you just get a little bit more leverage when you need to twist. So I thought, as far as usability, these Huskies are actually pretty good. The biggest caveat is that this handle is so easy to bump. There would be some situations where that might annoy you, but it wouldn't be too hard to maybe cut this down a little bit so it's not so easy to hit. Other than that, I mean, the ergonomics are excellent. And just kind of shows how little attention is paid to so many manufacturers, because every knockoff Chinese or otherwise Vise-Grip, the Harbor Freight ones, are all knockoffs of just a regular old Vise-Grip, rather than taking a look at what other locking pliers and design ideas have been out there and maybe said, hey, wait a minute, something like this might actually be better to make as a knockoff pliers because they offer some distinct advantages. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.